I just want to say welcome to another Law Politics mashup with
Yes.
Molly Jong Fast, and I'm Harry Littman,
Hi,
where
Harry Littman.
we kind of have very few rules, but I try to shoot a political question at Molly that's been on my mind, and she reciprocates with a legal
Yes.
question that's been on hers,
Yes.
and
Let's do it.
it's a mashup.
Yes. So tell me I want to ask you first, because there are all these court cases. It's the civil filing, the civil fraud case. We're waiting for the number, right? That Trump is going to
Yeah.
owe. Talk us through exactly what that is and why it's not happening yet, why it hasn't happened yet.
Well, okay. I mean, what he said, it's funny because we're waiting on two, and one we're really starting to get
Right.
nervous. That's the immunity claim of
Yes.
DC Circuit. With the one you're talking about,
Let's
he said,
talk about the immunity for a second on the DC circuit, because I know Andrew Weissman has been expressing some irritation about that too.
yeah, or consternation. So, look, back when it was argued, everybody tuned in because the question, first, you wanted to know, as always, which way are they going to go? And I thought, I think every observer thought they're gonna reject his claim of immunity. I hold to that view, but it's always with him the substance game and the delay game. And the thing about there's two potential sources for delay, and as the time goes on, they get more likely because the DC Circuit was out of the gate with a really fast briefing schedule. And when they've done that in the past, they've issued opinions within a week or two. They've clearly been writing before even the oral argument. And that hasn't happened. Why not? Two
Yeah, why
possibilities.
do you think?
Yeah, and maybe both. First is the presiding judge, Florence Henderson, may not have not Florence Henderson, and
I was going to
that
say,
Florence
what
Henderson.
are
What
the
was her show?
odds?
Yeah, right. Just, is may not be buying the same theory, even though I think she's not going to give him immunity. And the two of them, the other two, we're looking at least, will Childs and Pan state some like different nuanced theory of why no immunity. Here's why it matters, not just for the days that are elapsing, but if Henderson says something that's different, it could be that the Supreme Court would be interested in taking that. The six conservatives
Is
would like their view. If they take
this
that,
is the president can be king theory, right? That whenever the
I mean,
president does anything, it's fine.
the one they articulated in oral argument was he can command the Navy SEALs
Right,
to
steel
gun down
force.
an opponent, and unless there's an impeachment and conviction,
Mhm,
he can't be prosecuted. That's how vercocked it is. But
mhm.
the worry is that even though if they reject it, they'll do it in a way that gives him yet more time. One of two ways. Supreme Court decides to take the case, that could really drag on, or they state some theory that then goes back down to Chutkin, who applies it, easy as pie. That's happened before. But then would there be another round of appeal from the remand? So what's irritating Andrew, and consternating me, or both, is the possibility that this delay augurs yet more delay after they issue the opinion. So far, we've lost a month. We were at April. We can handle a month, but what if it turns into 2 or 3? It gets really dicey when you're in the heat of a campaign, a
So
national campaign.
the central tension here really is that legally Donald Trump has sort of two defenses he uses. One is to run out the clock and just to keep trying to kick things up to higher and higher courts because he knows it'll get him time, right? That's really his biggest way that he sort of solves his legal problems, right?
I mean, what's the other? That is the way. When you look over the
Yeah.
whole landscape, he can't, if he's not elected president, let's just put it that way, he can't escape serious damage to liberty or pocketbook or both. And his really only kind of play here is to somehow win the presidency and then
Run out
take
the
it from
clock.
there, shut down the
Yeah.
feds, investigate Fonnie Willis, etc. So all of these, he has some claims that don't stink, but not very many. But it doesn't matter when you look at the whole panorama. He's in deep, deep peril unless he can win. Okay, then
One of the
that brings me
yeah.
to my first. So obviously that keeps you up night thinking, and I'm sure you too. Can he win? And so what I try to uh,
Can he
conceptualize in
win?
my mind who is the voter who went for Biden in 2020 and will say, okay, I think I'm for Trump this time around, because he has to not just consolidate and keep the base. He's losing a little bit in the middle, but he has to gain. And I thought there is no such person, but it seems like there are some cohorts, Molly, that are like actually expanding a bit for him. I'm thinking of college educated males. It was always that
So
line that wasn't there. Hispanics, maybe. What the hell is causing his base to actually grow a bit?
so this is what I would say. I would say it's not that I don't think his base has grown. I think the problem and the reason why we have so much trouble with polling now is that there's a
Mm,
shifting electorate. So
yeah,
in 2016, the people who made Trump president were impossible to anticipate because a lot of them had never voted. Not a lot of them, but a certain percent was a shifting electorate, a group that pollsters didn't know to look for. And since then, they have been shifting the electorate to try and predict these sort of ghost voters that might come
they
back. And
pollsters. Yeah, I see.
yeah. Well, because ultimately, right, we're all working we're only working on polls, right? I mean, what else are we working on? What
Yeah,
other
right.
information do we
Yeah,
have? Right.
yeah,
I mean, Sarah Longwell does these really good focus groups, but that's 20 people,
yeah.
or I mean, so we're really working on polls. And I mean, you could I think there are some things that are like voter registration for sure. You can work on that, right? You can see where people are registering, but even that, it's not a science. One of the things that is you could look at is primary voter turnout, right? So Iowa is a very religious, tends to be very white and religious. They had very small turnout
Yeah.
for Biden. So for not for Biden, for Trump, I'm sorry. So that was he did really well, but it was, half of what it had been 4 years ago. So I think that's a
So your answer
question.
is that it isn't really like it's another foible with the polls, maybe.
Well,
Yeah,
no, I would say this. I would say until the summer, we're not going to know who the likely voters are.
yeah.
So, we really don't know. Does it seem to me? I think there are people who will vote Republican no matter what. And
Like
that
they
is
did
just,
4 years ago.
yes, I don't think that those people, I don't think it's a shifting. I don't think that those are people who voted for Biden who are leaving Biden. But I also think there are there are these X factors, right? Like a third party candidate. Also, how information is getting to the electorate is a real problem too. I would say are people not getting news? Are people not are people getting story, we've all heard the story of the person who is Biden is not pro choice because there are all these abortion bans
Yeah.
that are happening while he's president. So, I mean, there are unknown unknowns there. So that's a
Fair
very
enough. Okay,
satisfying
your
answer.
turn, because I wanna try to get to 3. I know your producer's tough here. Go
I know
ahead.
he's terrible. My question for you is okay, so the presidential immunity, again, should happen sooner rather than later. Then there's
It
the
should have happened a couple weeks ago, and that's why everyone's biting their nails. Go ahead. Yeah.
um, then there's this fraud number. And when does that come? What's the timetable on that?
Very, very soon, because the guy said, I'm aiming to do it by the 31st." Now, they don't subtract half a grade every day he's late, but there's very big public focus. So I think the most likely day is today. The second, we're on
Wow.
February 1st. Second most likely tomorrow. And if you ask for the number, she started the AG James. at 250, then went to 370. I think he'll probably go under what she's asking for because he's thinking about review on appeal. There's already a lot of chunky issues there. But still, this is drawing real blood, even if they don't see it for a while. Eugene Carroll and Letitia James, he's got to pony it up in order to appeal. And if he has even the kind of liquidity he says he's got, it still
It's
seems
gonna
to be
hurt.
almost wiped. Yeah, it feels to me like it really has sort of brought him a bit to his knees, and that's a big deal because his voters seem to count on his not just doing whatever he wants, but getting away with it.
Can his donors donate to the settlement?
Yeah.
They
I mean,
can.
there's some
Okay.
complicated election rules, but that's been the Achilles heel, right? He just that we know he paid all these legal fees, et cetera.
I mean, we've
Okay,
seen the filings for the legal fees, they're humongous, right? I
50
mean,
million over the last
yeah.
year, right? And he uses it as a sort of tool over his co-defendants to keep them close to pay their fees or not. Okay, I was really interested. That was a great article in Vanity Fair that you wrote, um, but it put me in mind. Have you seen this finding? Really striking that young voters, there's a really seems to be a pronounced division between men and women, not just on abortion or Me Too or whatever, but across the board. You have significantly more progressive women in this young, cohort, 22 to 30 or whatever.
Mhm.
Do you buy that?
Oh,
And man, what does it
yeah.
augur for going forward?
So that's from this data journalist called John Burns Murdoch
Right.
in the FT, who we actually had on the podcast. So I think it's a number of things, but I think Roe is the big one, right? I mean, well, you have one group of people where bodily autonomy, they used to have the right to have an abortion, a federal right to have an abortion. They don't have it anymore. Like, I don't know I mean, that
But
is
no, that
gender.
made them more progressive across the board, apparently. Gun
Yeah,
rights
because they're
and
furious.
I see.
I would say, look, if I were to again, I'm not in their heads, but like you have the right to abortion gone. You have Republicans obsessed with your body, right? Like these stories about they're tracking your cycles, you have that woman in Ohio who had to face a grand jury for the disposal of a corpse because she had a miscarriage in the toilet, right? You have the woman in Texas. I mean, you have these horror stories. And then I would add, you have Republicans fighting with Taylor Swift, right? So you have this sense in which they're saying, they're saying, you can be a woman, but only the women we want are, Kimberly Guilfoyle. That's a good
Yeah,
woman, right? But Taylor Swift, the self-made billionaire musician, that's not okay. And so I think people bristle when you tell them what to do. And remember, so much of America is about this like weird, and I'm not even sure it's good, but this kind of freedom, to have guns and be crazy. I think there's a reaction towards that. And it's
good.
2024. I mean, it's crazy. Question for you. Other court cases. We have the calendar here. The New York case is everything else he can kick the can on except the New York case. Is that right?
Not quite yet, but that's the bad trend. Eileen Cannon
Right.
is
She's
is
never
really
gonna.
slow
Yeah.
walking it. That's right. The big mess in Fulton County with Fonnie Willis and Wade, et cetera, I think works to make it much harder to do that one on time. The big hope always has been the most important and the most likely to move with dispatch, the Chutkin January 6th case, and that's precisely why this delay in the immunity opinion is so worrisome, because that's really the focus. I think the New York case will happen. Conduct before he was president, it's somehow already, I think, been absorbed by the electorate. I see that as the least likely to be a serious game changer.
Right. The New York, but
Yeah,
again,
they'd Stormy Daniels case, you know.
right.
I think that,
No,
yeah.
I know. It's a state that goes to a federal. It's a weird statute that there's not a huge precedent for. But I wonder how much, Trump has this whole thing, and this is where he uses these criminal trials or civil trials as a kind of campaign event. So he says to his people, he gets up there, he speechifies, this is America. He does all of his political stuff.
I'm your martyr. Yeah.
Right. I'm your martyr. But when he does it, it tends to backfire because these two things were not made to work together. So like, he brags about how rich he is, and then he gets this huge
Right.
judgment, right? Like if
Yeah.
he had said, I have no cash, that's what you're supposed to say when you're a defendant. So my question is, he's in this situation where he just can't, he's sort of stuck in this hamster wheel. Even if New York is not the best case, doesn't this, he really, having the porn star back again, having Stormy, I shouldn't say the porn star, having the adult film star back in court testifying, does that just doesn't seem like it helps grow the electorate.
Yeah, well, this is more like a question for you, but like I agree, but he's had 91 counts against him, and it really doesn't seem to have moved the needle. The polling, and you point out, there's a lot to be still learned about the weaknesses in polling. Suggest if he's actually convicted, that would move the
Right.
needle.
That really hurts
But
him.
this one seems like it's disgusting, and it was definitely
Right.
done to corrupt an election, and you would think it has a real oomph, but it was already before the election, and it seems like the least likely for that reason. It's all like in a parade of horribles. So I don't, we've been fooled so many times, but it seems like I am confident in saying that it doesn't have the same,
Right.
sledgehammer
It's not a great,
effect of what it
right.
doesn't get to what's really wicked about him as president or what he did as president, et cetera. Just him as a consummate, jerk.
But the question of like, does does it necessarily matter what the case is in this low information ecosystem? Does it just him just being dragged in and out of court? There have got to be people who see that and are like, I don't know that I want that in my next
Really.
president.
I think that's part of Nikki Haley. This would be more
Right.
your bailiwick again, but
Yeah.
that's sort of we don't need the chaos and uncertainty. You don't have to hate Trump, but man, don't you want to put him behind you? And so, and a jury standing up and saying conviction, and his having some accountability. Is that it? Or is it the nature of the conduct? And you're right, it's a low informed electorate. And that actually goes to my last question for you, which is, for lawyers watching him, in the Eugene Carroll case has been mind-boggling. I feel like
Yeah.
it's like I'm reading a 19th century novel, and he didn't stand for the jury. Oh my! But
Right.
it does seem to be. I really, like no other litigant I've ever seen. What an asshole! That said, it's whether he just can't help himself or it's a calculation. I've heard political analysts like you saying, it actually helps him. That's his political strategy. So, and my question is it
Does it?
really the being a sort of feral child who does everything but shoot spitballs at the judge? Is that actually a plus on the, and on for his political supporters? And is it something they ignore, or is it truly like add to his political luster that he can just throw whoopee cushions all over the courtroom and be what astonishingly, violating of all the rules of decorum.
So when I talked to Robbie Kaplan on my podcast, I asked
Yeah.
her, I said, like, well, because I had heard the deposition was really hairy, but she actually said the worst part of the whole trial was watching Alina Habba and Donald Trump behaved so badly in front of this judge, Kaplan, who's like a very formal judge. And she said, when you get in front of judges like this, you can't behave like that. It's just not how any of this is done. And, Alina Habba was like fighting with him because she's, sort of a reality television, this is reality television lawyering here. And so I don't know. I mean, look, his people think this is all, his people believe that like this was a deep state conspiracy against him. But a lot of them don't understand how things work, right? Like how courts work. And so, I don't know is the answer. I mean, I think that it seems very embarrassing, but they this is the fuck your feelings crowd, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm thinking what it'll look like next time we talk. Will Haley still be there? Will there actually be a case about to go? So it'll be fun as always.
About to go. Yes. Thank you. Great to
All right,
see
thank you.
Thank you.
Hang in there. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.